Hello, welcome to Indie Tutorials. My name is Guillermo and I would like to thank the patrons supporting this channel. Hello everyone, today we are going to do a little bit of housekeeping and refactoring to improve the backstep role states and merge those into a dodge action or ability, and that's the word that I was trying to look at in previous videos. So the first thing that we are going to do is go into our data folder, and we have this game input map asset, so double click on it and on click autosave. We are going to do some changes here and we don't want the compiler to start right away, so let's click on the actions maps. And instead of renaming, because I don't want to break the existing code, what I'm going to do is click on the backstep action here, right click on it, and then duplicate. Click on duplicate, right? So now that we have a duplicate, we can rename duplicate, and let's call this one dodge. Or if you want, you can call it dash, but I will keep it dodge. Then I will expand the content of the action for the bindings, and for the first one what I'm going to do is here in the interactions I'm going to click on the plus and add the tap. So what we want to do is for this action to be executed right away when we tap the B button of the gamepad or the space keyboard. So let's do the same here, interactions tab. I believe that can be done in this section here actually, but yeah, let's try it like so. And now that we have our dodge action, we can save the asset and let compiler to work. So before deleting the backstep action that we are not going to use anymore, we want to let's close up this asset and open up the Machinome editor. Right, so let's go into base control, input keys, and we had this Xbox B input key. If we scroll down, we were using the Unity input actions and it was mapped to the backstep. So let's click on this little icon here to bring up the reference selector, and let's click on the new action dodge. There we go. Now we can save our settings. And we can also check in the control maps, the player control maps, that still we are mapped or bound to the Xbox B input key for both the roll and the dash or the backstep ability. Okay, so the next step I'm going to do is to clean up a little bit the input mechanics that we had. So we're using this input listener component, but I would like to remove this logic makes a little bit of nonsense, because as you can see, we are fetching the input with the Unity input system, and then we're letting ORK fetch those values. So we need to make a decision to whom should be the responsible at the end of getting this or managing this input. And for some things we still need to do it with the game input system, the new input system, but for the whole purpose of the game we want the ORK framework to be responsible of the inputs. So what I'm going to do is create a new class, and we'll use that class for inputs for both the player and the AI. So in that case we can derive this base class for input, because let's say that these components, the character components, animancer components, and the state, they don't care who is controlling them. So that's the reason I want to split this input component into some better way logic. So let's get into it, and we are going to do a little bit of copy pasting. So let's open up this input listener component in Visual Studio, and let's go back to Unity, and here in the scripts folder we have gameplay behaviors. Let's create a new folder and let's call this one input, and inside the input folder let's create a brand new script, and let's call this one character brain. Why this name is because mainly in the Animancer documentation it refers to this naming convention to let know which is the script controlling the characters or the actors. So basically, yes, the brain is the one deciding what we want to do with the character. Okay, so let's open up this script. Let's go into the input listener component that we created before, and from here we want to basically copy this default execution order. Let's paste it. Let's paste it in here. We want to remove the seal key and change it to abstract. So we want to inherit from this class. We go back to the input listener and we copy the default execution order. So remember, this is to tell Unity that this script needs to be executed before all other scripts. And then let's go back to the character brain script, and we want to add the namespace to Animancer and add a reference to our character. So serialize field, character, the same way we did before, and we add a public character property, which is read-only property that will give us our current character. Right? And also there is a nice thing that we can implement here. There is the onValidate method from the mono behavior, and this needs to be executed in editor mode. So let's add a pragma here for the Unity editor, and if, and we can call now the protected, let's make it virtual because we are on an abstract class that needs to be inherited from onValidate. So the reason I added the Animancer namespace is because I'm going to use here this game object, and there is an extension method for getComponent, as you can see here in the suggestion, get component in parent or children. This is from the Animancer libraries, and here we can pass our character. And it is complaining because this extension method is expecting us to pass a reference. So let's change here in this public property, and let's change it to ref, like so, and add here the reference. Now it's working. So save the script, let it compile, and let's go back to Unity. Okay, now here inside this same input folder I will create another script, and let's call this one player input brain. Later on we will have, like, for example, enemies or AI input brain, something like that, that is going to be driven by behavior trees. So for now let's just create this new player input brain, and let Unity compile and open up the script in Visual Studio. There we have it. So the first thing, of course, we want to do here is to, instead of inheriting from model behavior, we want to inherit from this character brain we created. And now we can start copying from the original input listener component. Okay, so let's go into the input listener component, and the first thing we want to do is to add the namespace for input system, the new input system. Then we want to have our reference for our game input map assets. So let's copy this one, these two lines. And I would like to change this naming convention again, so let's just call this one like input. And same for the input property. So one way we can do this is using the shortcut Ctrl+R for renaming, and let's just type input. And for input actions we can again rename and just call this one input. There we go. So the next thing I want to do is copy from here. We have our static vector movement and the vector look, so let's bring those two. Same thing here, I will just change the M to uppercase and the L uppercase L as well. The static is for the ORK framework for the static method we need later on. So now we want to create an instance of the game input math in the awake method. So let's check again if input is null, then we add or create a new instance. And again, in the onEnable and onDisable, we are going to add the bindings or the map events for these control maps. So what we can do is, let me see, yeah, we can copy both and just remove what we don't need. We'll see that we have a lot of errors now, so we can just copy the input name here and add it, or replace the input actions, backstep and actions enable. There we go. So for the backstep, we don't have backstep, or we are not going to have backstep anymore. We have now dodge, so let's change that for dodge. And we can remove here the cancel, because now we are listening for the tap, so there is no up and down in this case. And same here in the onDisable, so let's change this to dodge and to unsubscribe for the event. Now we have this onMovement method, so we have this onMovement. Let's copy the whole thing, put it here, and we don't want to call this movement event anymore, but what we want to do is to change the variable name accordingly. So this will resolve the onMovement. Let's take a look of the onLook. So let's copy those and paste it here. Same thing for the look variable. Go back to the input listener component, and we have now this onRoll or back step, and later on we have this the Machinum static function. So let's copy those and paste it here. So again, let's fix the variable naming, and let me just remove this comment we don't need anymore, keeping things clean. There we go. So let me check here. Actually, well, we don't need to register to this perform event altogether. ORK Framework is listening to the action script itself, action map script, so we don't need or action map asset, so we don't need to actually register unless we wanted to do some custom logic later on our custom script, but we are not going to do that. So now that we have our player input brain script, we need to let ORK know that this is the new script that it needs to search for this static function, and also this is the script that it needs to disable when it needs to take player control. So let's do that. So let's go back to Unity and let it compile. So back in Unity, what we want to do is add this script to our player. So let's open the prefab. Once the prefab is open, let's just drag this new script into the prefab, and you can see that the player character was already added automatically because this onValidate function we created in the character brain script. Alrighty, so now that we have that one, we can open up Machinum editor. Ctrl-Alt-M is the shortcut. So from here we can go into base controls, game controls, and then in the player settings, if we scroll down, you can see here in the control behavior for the player we were using this class name input listener component. So let's delete that one and start typing player input brain, and hopefully because of the reflection now we have the suggestion, so we can now save the settings. Let's close up ORK editor, and we are not done yet. We need to remove this input listener and also change how the character movement is listening for the movement X and Y and the trigger of the actions for the dodge. So right now we have this vector2 event listener and event listener for the bull game event. So let's open up the character movement script and let's make here some modifications. So here in the top we want to add a new variable. Let's call it this one public bull dodge, and let's initialize it to false. Now if we scroll down, we can see that we were listening for the movement input. Here in this movement we were receiving the vector2 from the Unity's new input system. So what I would like to do here is create a private method, and I will call this one handle movement. and I will call this handle movement function or method here in the update method of the player. And since we are not receiving anymore this vector movement, input movement, we are now going to listen into the ORK framework's input system, right? So what I'd like to is to take this move direction vector2, and we are going to listen in for the x-axis. And let me go quickly back to the Machinome editor just to show you the reason for this. If we go into the input keys, we got this horizontal move and vertical move input keys. They are not a vector2 but just an axis, and those, if we scroll down, we remember that we are using the get horizontal axis and vertical move. And as you can see, I forgot to change those to the new player input brain, so let's change that. Player input brain, the function name is the same, and I just copy this one and paste it in the okay, it automatically copy on both. That's good. And let's say the changes. So we are only receiving the X or Y. So that's the reason we need to split in our script. When we are receiving the X, and we are going to get this X from the gaming is love namespace, then we type Machinome namespace input key, and we want to get the axis of this input key. Now we need to send here or put here the input key asset. Remember, now in ORK Framework 3 all this stuff are stored in assets like scriptable objects. So what we want to do here is gaming. I'm typing the whole namespace for learning purposes. Machinome, in this case, is the Mackie namespace, and let me add a space here to put it in the new line so it's more readable and make more room by collapsing this stuff. So Mackie input keys, and we have this method get asset, and the asset we want to get here, now we need to pass an index, and this is something that we need to remember. For now we are going to use the constant methods later on. So for example, the horizontal move has an index of 4 and the vertical an index of 5. So keep that in mind. So we need to retrieve the asset with index 4. Let's close up the brackets here, and now we are receiving the axis of this horizontal move. So let's take these two lines in this case and just copy paste them, and I'm going to change here the axis to Y, and the get axis in this case will be index 5. Okay, so this is how we handle now the movement. After doing that, we safely can delete this onMovement function, and we should be good to test that we have not lose any features about the movement. So let's go back to Unity and let's go to the scene and let's hit play. Okay, so Control P. And if we start moving the character, the player, we can see that the functionality still works. So let's get out of play mode, and now from our player prefab, let's open up the prefab. we can safely remove this vector to game event listener. Remove. And we can also remove the input listener component. Remove. And the bool game of the game event listener, so we can also remove that one. And yeah, so let's now start working with the new dodge or better dodge mechanic.